Hello, and welcome back for the next episode of our alumni interview series, Brewer Reflections. Today, I am excited to be joined by not one, but two Brewer alums from the class of 2009, Emily Love Leserman from the women's swimming and diving team, and Scott Leserman from the men's volleyball team. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
So apologies, I'm going to look to the side for a little bit, but as I've done with all of our episodes, I'm going to take a moment for a quick humble brag about our guests and their careers. So we're going to start with Scott. So a 4-year member of the men's volleyball team, he helped lead the Brewers to a resurgence that put Vassar back on the map and the successful path it's on now. So during Scott's freshman season, the team had a rough 2-17 record. Flash forward to his junior year, and they were 26-7. So the most wins in program history at that time, and it's still tied for the most wins in program history. And that was in the 2008 season. He helped the Brewers win the 2008 NECVA championship, which earned the Brewers a spot in the 2008 Molten Division III Men's Invitational Volleyball Championship, which at that time was actually the equivalent of the national championship for Division III. So the Brewers finished as the national runners-up that year. Another outstanding record followed the next year as Scott was named an AVCA second-team All-American. He continues to hold impressive records at Vassar, including third all-time in career serve percentage and career digs per set. He also ranks first in digs per set in a season with a 3.84 mark. And that mark earned him the NCAA Division III Statistical Championship title in that season in that category. Emily had one of the most dominant careers of any swimmer in Vassar history, earning National All-America honors 3 times, while twice being named an honorable mention All-American. A 12-time, and I'm pretty certain I've got that right, a 12-time Liberty League champion, including 4 straight victories in the 200 backstroke. She still owns the school records in the 50 and 100 freestyle, only recently having her backstroke records beaten. She was the league's Rookie of the Year in 2005 and went on to earn Liberty League Swimmer of the Year honors back-to-back in both 2007 and 2008. So I could go on forever, honestly, but I'm going to stop there and actually let Scott and Emily talk. So again, thank you both so much for joining me today. And really, what I'd like to start off with is tell me, for each of you, I guess this is a question for each of you, what brought you to Vassar College?
Do you want to go? Yours is a little more unique because you're a man.
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California and had family on the East Coast. And when it came time to try and find a school, obviously academics were incredibly important. And I also ideally was looking for, the opportunity to play volleyball at a varsity level as well. And, toured Vassar, I think it was around Thanksgiving of my senior year, and just fell in love with the place. And, honestly, that's kind of what it came down to. It was, really just frankly that simple. The great, the vibe of the campus was a fit. It was different enough from what I knew, but also comfortable enough at the same time, and really just provided, at least on paper, seemed like it was going to provide the opportunities that I was looking for. And fortunately it did, and then some.
Mine was, I went on a bunch of tours to a bunch of different schools I'd been recruited at. For a long time, I thought I was going to be in the Patriot League, which is a D1 league. So Lehigh and Bucknell and Lafayette, Lafayette, yeah. And that's where I thought I was going to end up. And then I started touring D3 campuses, and I met Liesel. And she was the first coach who said, hey, yes, you can be a swimmer here, but you can also explore really any major you want to. So you can be a psychology major, you can be pre-med, you can be in education, you can be a drama major, you can be a music major, really like at a D3 liberal arts school. The academics are here and the athletics are there and they work together. And that sold me. so because I wanted to do more than, you know, be an English major at a D1 school, because that's the only major that fit my hours of practice, which was what a couple of the schools told me, where they said, oh, well, here are like 5 majors you can be if you want to be on the swim team. So that whole student experience was what sold me. And I loved Liesel. She sold me on the school.
Absolutely. You know, that has become like the common vibe as I've continued with Brewer Reflections, and all the folks that I've talked to, is just, you know, the overall vibe of Vassar and what Vassar brings to your life, not just as a college student, but what it gives to you afterwards. So kind of in that vein, what made your experience at Vassar so special?
So obviously I loved being a swimmer. I also, as soon as swim season was done, every spring I would do a play. So that was kind of fun to get to still do that, because I really went in thinking I was going to be a theater major, and then I ended up being psychology and education. But the other thing is that I wasn't only friends with athletes, and I wasn't only friends with people on the swim team. That wasn't my whole world. It kind of allows you to have lots of different pockets in your life. And my senior year, I lived with 3 other women who weren't athletes at all. And they're still my best friends. They were in my wedding. They all ended up marrying Vassar men. And now we all have
We're all athletes, actually.
We're all athletes. They all ended up marrying Vassar male athletes. And we still, you know, we obviously haven't gotten together this year, but we all have children now, and we try to get together 2 or 3 times a year. So the very long lasting friendships that were formed there is easily my most special and cherished part of my experience.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, the academics were amazing. You know, the being able to play was a lot of fun, especially my junior and senior year when we were winning a lot.
That always helps. The experience.
It definitely helps. Yeah. That 2-17 mark freshman year still stings a little bit. But it really came down to the people. I mean, it really is just such an amazing group that, you know, that evolved throughout my time there. My teammates and I are still really close. You know, I've built lifelong friendships there, but not just within the team. You know, outside of that as well. I mean, we as a couple have so many friends who are couples from Vassar that we're still really close with. I mean, I feel incredibly blessed to have that type of camaraderie and togetherness that came out of our Vassar experience.
Yeah, I should also say, because this feels like an Academy Award speech where I didn't mention my husband. I also met my husband at Vassar, so that was good.
There you go.
And we actually got married in the chapel. And so I'm from Connecticut, he's from LA, so it was essentially a destination wedding for literally everyone other than Liesel and Coach Penn, because no one else lived.
But totally worth it.
Totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Absolutely. You know, and that's another thing is, you know, everybody remarks on the connections. And I think that's just unique to that. You know, I think there's certain schools that bring that. You know, personally, I went to a D1, and while I did make connections, you know, I was involved in athletics and I made connections, but you know, there's something about that small school experience that really makes those connections, those lifelong connections, that you just can't trade. And I kind of feel like, you know, Vassar, you know, before I used to work at Mount Holyoke, you know, it's also kind of almost a seven sister trait as well, is that connection and that cohesiveness, even after Vassar went co-ed. Talk to me a little bit about what your time as a student athlete meant to you.
I'll start with this one. So
he's got a good elevator pitch.
It meant so much to me that I thought I wanted to make a career out of it. In fact, it was my first career. So I was an economics major, and the whole like finance banking thing just really it wasn't aligning with what I was interested in doing. And I was like, you know what? I really want to give coaching a try. And so for 6 years post Vassar, I coached at the Division I level, spending the majority of my time coaching in the Big Ten for women's volleyball. And you know, a lot of that goes back to Coach Penn and the impact he had on me, you know, in my personal development. And you know, I feel like I owe him so much because he gave so much to me and helped me mature and grow in ways that I wouldn't have been able to without him pushing me in the ways that he did. And so, you know, I had an amazing experience professionally out of that because of it. Ultimately, it didn't align with what I wanted out of my life. And thank goodness we're now settled in a way that coaching would never have allowed us to be, especially at that level. But really, I mean, it had such a tremendous impact for me and still continues to.
I am naturally kind of like a frenetic energy person, which bodes well for a sport like swimming, where you just like put it in and like go, 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 go for hours. It's nice to spend your energy that way, but it's also good to like gain focus, learn scheduling, learn time management, learn the skills that you have to in order to be successful. And swimming gave me like a quantifiable way in which to be successful. You know, if I had a time that I wanted to beat, I knew I had to work to beat that time. So I very much learned the cause and effect of my actions and my energy. And it was great. I had an amazing coach, an amazing team who pushed me to meet those goals. It's a unique part of also being D3 is that a lot of the times there's not enough space for there to be a men's team and a women's team that practice separately. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of male teammates that would let me be in the lane with them and would push me to be better and better and better. And that was great because then I was able to kind of see myself push past anywhere I had thought I was going to be when I went in. I remember getting recruited by one of the D1 schools, and they kind of told me, like, your goal for when you graduate will be to have a 208 backstroke. And I remember thinking in high school, like, that would be awesome. And Liesl never said that. Liesl never said, like, this is the goal for you. But she would tell me if I went a 205 or a 206, she'd be like, you could do better than that. So having all of these people around me to push me and make me better laid this groundwork later on in life when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career and what I wanted to do professionally, and also just from a familial standpoint. Now I know how much energy I have to be able to chase 2 little boys around while working full time. So very, very long-winded way to say that time management was one of those like big bedrocks that I was grateful to have as a student athlete.
Yeah. And it's okay. So I'm fully going to admit this. So we mentioned before we actually started rolling that I talked to Coach Liesl Prater-Lee before this interview. And I'm not going to lie, the frenetic energy was almost the exact words that she said to describe you.
Yeah. Yeah, she always has said that.
Yeah, but I one of the things that also stood out to me was, she, and you just mentioned it as well, is she talked about the cohorts around you and your teammates and how that kind of also built you up as a student athlete, having those. And again, you talked about that. So it's really cool to see that, that she still remembers that, clear as day. And it's still something that you carry with you.
When we started my freshman year, the men's team was 6 people. And by the time I graduated, the men's team was more than 20 people. Like, the women's team always had pretty big numbers. But then we started getting recruits from who were top 10 in an event from Boston or from Illinois. And I swam with a girl named Allison Kanker, who was a big time swimmer out of California. And that was kind of something unheard of at Vassar, to have a California swimmer, because it literally is like California, Texas, and Illinois swimmers are just a completely different level than everyone else. They're just
right. Yep.
so athletic. And we got Allie, and Allie was this completely well-rounded swimmer who was an amazing IMer, an amazing breaststroker, a really good leader. And she was one of those people that really built up the team. And then I got to be a captain with her senior year, which was super fun. But yeah, we started getting these really young recruits that were just better and better and better. And then the men's team had the same thing. When I was a senior, we got a kid from Punahou in Hawaii named Jack Smart. And I think he might have been the last one from that era to be taken down the record board. But he was the first male swimmer to qualify with an NCAA cut. And, so I feel like being at the where the tides changed for that team and seeing the way that we all kind of saw what was going on in the pool, and we're like, oh, we can make this something. We can be competitive on the level. We don't have to be the 10th out of 12 teams at the New York State thing. We can be 4th, 3rd, 2nd. We can win Seven Sisters. We can place well at Liberty Leagues, and that was so fun to get to do that all together.
Absolutely. So this is going to be a tough one. I'm not going to lie. I need each of you to talk to me about your favorite memory at Vassar. It can be a sport memory or a non-sport memory, but draw back on the data banks here and tell me what your favorite memory at Vassar is.
Well, I'm not going to go into anything on Friday and Saturday nights, so give me a minute here.
Don't do that. I know what direction you're going in. Don't do that. This is a family show.
All right, I got it. So for me, it was in 2008 when we made the national championship match up at Springfield College, and just to see the level of support that we received. Our athletic director at the time organized a bus to bring students up to the match, and it was just such a unique experience to be able to be part of, especially knowing the constraints that, were our reality at that time, too, in terms of the fact that, budgets are never endless and all these other things. And yet there was so much effort and, appreciation towards kind of our achievements as a team. I mean, it was just really special to be part of. And then it kind of kicked into our first match the next year was against Springfield as well. And I'll never forget, this Frisbee team showed up in full costume, and we had, about 500 people in Kenyon Hall. And I remember the Springfield team just looking and being like, where are we? Are we on a different planet right now? Like, what is going on? So yeah, those would be mine.
Yeah.
There's always something special about Springfield men's volleyball. It always seems to evoke memories for everybody that I talk to in terms of men's volleyball, honestly.
Yeah, there's something to it.
Those were so fun. Going to those matches were so fun. One of our friends, Danny Kadishin, held up a sign that was the leading point scorer on Springfield's team, and I forget his name, but he said loves Matchbox 20, and that's such a version of Vassar heckling. Is we're gonna pick on you for liking 90s pop rock. Mine, a lot of it, aside from meeting my wonderful husband, mine has a lot to do with the fact that I formed these amazing lifelong friendships with women there. And I have a lot of male friends from Vassar too, but I think I went into college thinking oh no, I'm just one of the guys. I hang out so well. And then I quickly realized there is so much importance to strong female friendships who build themselves up, each other up, and can have confidence and kind of take away that frenetic energy that I had, because it's okay just being yourself. You don't need to try harder for anyone. Just be present and be focused. And I am so grateful for all the relationships that I still have there, both in my suite mates and my teammates. And then actually Scott lived with some women who are still like very, very much a part of our lives. So mine is my like very strong foundation of, you know, badass lady gang.
You know, I have to ask you this, Emily. One of my like distinct memories of Vassar, because obviously you and I talked. So I was at RPI for 7 years. So I actually saw the majority of your career and hosted 2 Liberty League championships. And then in Mount Holyoke, we competed with Vassar in Seven Sisters. And one of the things that always stood out to me, especially because we hosted Seven Sisters twice when I worked at Mount Holyoke, was the guys team always came to Seven Sisters. So the last time we hosted Seven Sisters, and they wore the burgundy and white striped overalls. Did they do that when you were there?
No, that was an iteration, like a few, I don't even know if it was anyone on the team that I ever overlapped with. I think that even like came after Jack Smarts and Greg Milligan's
but it was an
senior
excellent
year.
addition.
Yeah, it's great.
I was gonna say, I've been trying to figure out like where that came from, because
It's so cute.
it was literally the highlight of the championship, just having like 6 guys wearing burgundy and white overalls, just cheering their brains out for the women's team. So I was just curious if that was your era or not.
No, it passed me. Yeah.
Okay.
Too old.
Let's talk a little bit about, so how did your athletic experience, Emily, you touched on it a little bit in terms of what being a student athlete brought to you. But how did your athletic experience at Vassar shape your future?
So like I said, yeah, I mean, the ability to manage time, the ability to set goals and meet them. And then that very early on moving into adulthood and having already had the experience of essentially having a full-time job, you know, it obviously wasn't monetary, but for 4 hours every day, I was committed to something. And when I wasn't in the pool or in the weight room or on the track, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about how to get better and planning and focusing and, you know, changing your diet, not drinking for 6 months of every year when you're in college, you know, really committed to this idea of this is what I'm focused on right now. So when I graduated and I went to grad school, it was a breeze, honestly. Like obviously academically it was hard, but the commitment of time that it took for me to get my doctorate was something I had already known. And it was funny because in my doctorate program, there were 4 of us that were all college athletes, and we all had the same kind of experience that were just like, oh no, we know how to manage a time schedule, because we didn't have just like 2 classes a day every other day to get through for 4 years. Yeah.
And I think for me, it did 2 things. First, especially having lost a lot my first 2 years, it knocked me down a peg, which was a really good thing. Kind of that humility that came along with losing a lot was something that I really value, because it showed that no matter how great you think you are, how great your achievements have been in the past, or whatever type of way you want to frame it, you're going to get your butt kicked every once in a while. And how do you figure out a way to pick yourself back up and make yourself better? And I think ultimately those experiences coupled with the good times helped me become such a better leader and also just a better person than I was prior. I mean, it gave me, it really, again, it knocked me down a couple pegs in a way that has made me a much more productive adult than I would have been coming straight out of high school.
I never would have thought to look at it the way. That's a really great way to put it. Cause I think a lot of people, you know, when they experience that, they don't think of that in that way. They just think of it as, you know, as losing, and to have that kind of mindset is really outstanding.
And it's carried on to my professional life. I mean, I manage a team of 3 essentially HR recruiters, and what we talk about every day is how can we get better? It's not about, certainly we'll celebrate our achievements, but it's like, are we getting better today? And that was really kind of the mindset that we took as a team. And frankly, that was the mindset that allowed us to achieve what we ultimately did, with also adding a couple of really, really talented players along the way. So
Yeah.
it was really great. It was a tremendous thing to kind of be able to look back and have that perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, we're all going to hit the mat at some point, whether it's in sports or life or relationships and love, work, whatever it is, you're going to hit the mat. If you get up and you're willing to take it on again, that's the lesson. So,
Oh yeah.
we all have that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you both kind of led right into my next question. So I'm gonna combine the two. What path did you take right after graduation, and what are you doing now?
So so I followed a boy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was a bold move on her part.
Scott got a graduate assistant job at the University of Illinois, and I was slated to do my student teaching in Poughkeepsie for a semester after I graduated. And it was about 2 months before that would start. And I was talking to my dad, and I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. And he was just like, okay. And I was like, I don't know exactly what I want to do. I have an idea of what I want to do. But I don't think I want to be a teacher. And he's like, well, you can't just make that decision. I was like, well, I'm going to have to, because if I don't make it, then I'm going to have to go to this student teaching thing. And then that's a really hard lesson to learn either midway through or making it all the way through. So when I was at Vassar, I was a psychology major with an education minor. And within the education department was the American Sign Language course, which I had started as a freshman for my foreign language requirement. And I loved it. So I went ASL 1, 2, 3, 4. And then my 3rd year, I created an independent study in ASL where it was ASL linguistics and pre-interpreter. And then I went through interpreter 1, interpreter 2. And then senior year, I was basically like the TA or whatever version Vassar has of that to the professor. And we had a deaf culture class, and in it we watched this movie, and it was called The Sound and the Fury. And it's about a family who has twins, one of whom is hearing and one of whom is deaf. And the father of these twins has multi-generational deaf individuals within it. And the mother also has generational deafness in her family. And it's about this hearing couple deciding whether or not they put a cochlear implant on this child, or which is a device that allows for hearing, or they raise him in a foundation of sign language and allow him to be deaf. And at the end of the movie, the family decides that they're going to get a cochlear implant because they themselves, even though they all know American Sign Language, are a hearing family. And at the end of the movie, there's this person who puts the cochlear implant on the baby and activates it and kind of counsels the family on it. And I leaned over to the professor and was like, what is that person? And she goes, that's an audiologist. And they're the person who test hearing and diagnose hearing loss. And they do cochlear implants and hearing aids and balance disorders. And I went home and I Googled it. And I was like, this is a job that is 15% medicine, 50% counseling, and 30%, 35% science technology. And I was like, that could be great for me. That's all the parts of my brain that I'm looking for. So I had this conversation with my dad about being a teacher. And then the next day I went to a local audiologist in my hometown and shadowed them. And I came home and I said, I'm dropping out of the teaching program, and I think I want to be an audiologist. So I moved to Illinois with Scott, and I got a job in a special education classroom that also was attached to an educational audiology facility, and the teacher was great and letting me go back and forth between the two. And in October of that year, I applied to doctorate programs for audiology, and I graduated in 2013 with my doctorate, and I've been working for 7 years. And now I work at a children's hospital as a pediatric audiologist.
That is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So mine is not that interesting compared. So I think I kind of touched on both of this parts already, but I started working as a coach, women's volleyball, Division I. Just living that crazy lifestyle where it just was the polar opposite of Vassar in so many ways. Like all the bells and whistles and glitz and glamour, but it was
private jets. They were on private jets.
Ridiculous, ridiculous. But it was the entirety of my life. I mean, I was working 90 hours a week plus. My last year of coaching, I worked every day for 5 months without a day off. And I was like, I'm done. I can't do this to Emily anymore. I can't physically do this anymore. And kind of ended up taking a couple of side steps. Took a job in another humbling experience. I was a retail manager at Target for a period of time, which if anyone knocks people that work in retail, try working it for a little bit and you'll have a very different perspective. Yeah. It's awful. It's awful.
I would, as somebody who worked in retail, I would agree.
Yeah.
But it's still I think it's the most important job he's ever had.
Is.
I truly think he needed
provided
that.
the most perspective for me. But ultimately, it allowed me to transition into a career that took all the things I really liked from coaching, but I'm doing it in a much more manageable work-life balance setting. So I work in human resources in the talent acquisition space for a big healthcare company and do a lot of work around both recruiting, but also employer brand and digital marketing. And it's a really strategic thing, but also analytical and data driven. And, it's been something I never, ever would have predicted that I would be doing, but I can't really imagine doing something too different from what I'm doing right now.
That's amazing. Honestly, I mean, it honestly is amazing to see how, and I one of the last alums that I talked to as well, kind of had the same experience, started with A and went to B and then realized that, X, Y, and Z were the right path. It just took a while to get there, but each stop ends up adding something to the experience and makes you just better as you keep going. So I had 2 questions left, but I feel like one of them you guys have completely answered every single time I've asked anyway. So I'm going to skip to my last question, which is, obviously right now, as things are just crazy. We talked about it, how the college experience right now in a COVID era, in a social justice era is there's just so much that college students are dealing with right now. But for you both, one of the things I think is great and kind of speaks over generations is that everybody faces something difficult in their college career. I faced it. I was in college during 9/11, so that was, that was a weird, that was a weird subject to be able to grasp and wrap your arms around. So I feel like every generation kind of has their own challenge. So for you both, what advice or thoughts do you have, not just for student athletes, but current Vassar students in this kind of crazy time that we're in?
So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is it's great training for what's to come. There's a lot of us that go to Vassar and come from privileged backgrounds, of various types. Again, that's far from everybody, but there's a good percentage of the student population at Vassar that had a lot of advantages in their life that allowed them to find their way, to Vassar. And I think one of the things that I've seen that people have been really successful coming out of Vassar is that they were willing to take on that adversity. They were willing to, first of all, acknowledge that it was diversity. Oh my goodness. That was not the right word.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, that's a different topic for a different day.
I'll get to that.
But adversity, they face it in different ways. And, those people that frankly haven't maybe found their path yet tended to be those that just kind of went with, were the happy-go-lucky that weren't really willing to face the hard times when they came. And I think that, unfortunately, the reality is for those students who are currently at Vassar, like right now sucks. Like there's no sugarcoating it. It's crazy, miserable in varying ways. And if you're open to the idea of kind of embracing that and thinking about it and like, how can I actually leverage this for, what's to come in my life? I think that is really probably the healthiest way to view it, but also the most helpful to, a successful career and successful life beyond the walls of Vassar.
And I would say the smartest people I've ever met in my life were the people that I met during those 4 years at Vassar, and not even necessarily the professors, but the students, and everyone coming from their own experience and being so vocal and so opinionated and so bold. I mean, I hadn't met anyone like the students that I met at Vassar when I was a freshman, and I was shocked, and I was always insecure that I was the dumbest kid in class and that I was just there because I was a swimmer, and somehow Liesl pushed me in. And, sitting with people and hearing people's ideas and hearing the thoughtfulness of the student body opened my mind and opened my heart to all of these amazing things. That being said, at the time that we were students, the biggest population of people we were advocating for, it felt, this is maybe my own opinion, but it was the LGBTQ community. That was absolutely the community that we were protecting and uplifting and celebrating, and deservedly so. That is a population that deserves to be protected and celebrated and lifted up. There are other marginalized populations of students at Vassar that deserve that same energy and thoughtfulness and care. And I encourage all of these very thoughtful, very opinionated, very bold young minds to sit for a little bit and don't always share an opinion. Listen to the stories and listen to the experiences of people whose stories need to be told, because there are many people who are going to have inherent privilege that will allow them to voice those things. And we just need to sit and be quiet and say, I understand, I will never understand, but I will learn and I will try. That's definitely from the social justice perspective of things. We have to be there for our fellow brothers and sisters of humanity. We have to be in this kingdom of humanity, and try to protect one another. And I think because everyone is so thoughtful and so loving and so open at Vassar, they're the hearts that are going to be able to take that on. But we also need to say, like, it's okay not being right all the time, which is a really, really hard thing for anyone to say. And it's a really, really hard thing for brilliant young people to say. But sometimes with age comes a little bit of wisdom that, like, it's okay to not know. And it's okay to say, I don't know, and help me.
I honestly, I don't even know that we need to add anything more to that, because that was just perfect. That was outstanding.
Yeah, that was much better than what I said. Once again, not surprising in the slightest.
It's okay. You know what? It balances. Everything balances out. It makes it all work.
Into your yang. So,
Scott, Emily, Truly, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk everything Vassar. I really do appreciate it. Please remember for everybody tuning in that we will be back again with another episode of Brewer Reflections, and we will see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thanks, Amy.